John Tavares goes down in practice on the eve of Sheldon Keefe's return to Toronto. Let's get into all of that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Tonight might be a good night to utilize that promo code because Sheldon Keefe is making his return to Toronto. So should be a good one. The Devils are a really good team, but they've been sputtering of late. So two quality teams, two playoff caliber teams that have not played well, but there should be a lot on the line with Sheldon Keefe coming back into Toronto on both sides. I'm expecting a good game. We'll preview and tee it up throughout the show today. I think we got to kind of start with the big news here in Toronto, Dave, and that's that John Tavares, injured in practice, got tied up with Chris Tanev. A stick kind of got in his skates during a puck battle along the boards. He gets upended and favors his right leg. He stays down for a little bit. The video's up on Twitter. Mark Masters posted it. You can kind of see it out there. And we're not sure the extent of the injury, if it's short-term, long-term. Is he going to miss any time? No updates yet. But, man, was that ever a scary sight to see.
It was, and the fact is that he went right to the locker room, didn't go to the bench. Usually that's not a good sign in anything like that because players usually will try to see if they can skate it off, and it's just like, no, this wasn't a skated off sort of issue. Hopefully it's something that won't hamper him and won't keep him out of the lineup. Craig Berube didn't. He just said like that he was being evaluated, which it's not good when he's saying he's being evaluated. Sometimes coach is like, it was just a little thing. It happened. He's fine.
Yeah, should be good to go for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't get that. We didn't get that. He did say he didn't see it. Like, he didn't see what happened. He just saw that he was injured. But, yeah, hopefully, I mean, for the sake of the Maple Leafs, this is not a long-term injury. Like, Tavares is having a great season. 20 goals, 22 assists, 42 points in just 43 games for the 34-year-old, star player for Toronto. And with the way that Matthews' injury has kind of plagued him all year, Tavares has stepped up big and filled in a lot of those goals and offensive shoes that Matthews has kind of left behind. But now you got the injury here. And it's just, it's I don't know, it's a pretty significant blow with the way that Tavares has been playing if this guy's going to miss any amount of time for Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, the worst position to lose a body right now is center ice, especially like either Tavares or Matthews. You just can't afford really to lose either one of them. And like we've seen with Matthews out, Tavares has had to really pick things up, and he's done it very well this year. And like that's been the one thing the Leafs have been able to rely on is John Tavares this season. So it just throws everything in flux because for God's sake, we had David Kampf as a top 6 center with the last injury. Okay, like I'm not ready for that again. I don't want to see that again.
Well, I mean, who do you think ends up being 2C tonight? I mean, they got another game against the New Jersey Devils. If it's not John Tavares, it's a good chance it's going to end up being David Kampf, David Morassutti. I mean, it seems to be the guy who they want to play there.
This is the time where the David's got to say, now let like a Max Domi go up there and be the 2C. Let him play the more minutes and let David Kampf be like third line center if he has.
I mean, we said the same thing when Matthews was out, and they continued to make David Kampf as the second line center. So I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, the injury came after we saw the lineup, the lines in the skate yesterday. So they're going to be a little different than what we saw in practice, the projected lines, which we'll get to in a moment. But just not good. I mean, hopefully he's not missing significant time. That would really, really be a big damper on the Maple Leafs and not just, be worried about the season, but also like at his age, if you miss extended time, I mean, he might not be the same player ever again, especially if it's like a structural injury. Hopefully it's just a little tweak and he's okay. But if it's anything more than that, I mean, that could be a big blow to not just the season, the Maple Leafs, but possibly even Tavares' career at this point in his career.
I mean, it just reminds you too of a good thing you have. Like you always say, you don't know how good you have it until you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
This could be the case with John Tavares, right? When we're talking about his status, the fact that he's not signed going into next year and what that potentially could look like if, things kind of don't work out and he's gone. You're going to potentially get a little preview of what that could look like.
Would open up some cap space, though. If he gets caned or Kucherov or Mark Stone or whatever you want to talk about it, would open up some cap space to maybe go a little big buck hunting. We talked yesterday in the podcast a little bit about a JT Miller trade potentially. I mean, I can't think of a more perfect replacement realistically, but that's getting a little ahead of ourselves again. There should be an update within the next 24 hours, I would assume, possibly before puck drop if he gets a chance to I'm sure he will get a chance to get into the building and the doctors will get another look at it after the swelling goes down. And hopefully we have an idea, although the Maple Leafs aren't usually too forthcoming with the injuries when it comes to Toronto. So I'm sure it'll end up being day to day, and then we won't see him for a month because that seems to be what happens with Leafs these days. But yeah, just hopefully it's not anything too serious, and Tavares won't miss much time because the Leafs certainly cannot afford it, especially against a good team like the New Jersey Devils, who are going to have a lot of money on the board because it's Sheldon Keefe's return to Scotiabank Arena. We'll come back on the other side and we'll go through, start previewing the game, what to look out for, and we'll take a look at the projected lines on both squads as well. That's coming up next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidate faster. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need.
Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. You can find us free and available wherever you get a podcast and also up on YouTube. The Maple Leafs taking on the New Jersey Devils for the third time this season, but the first time in Toronto, which means it's Sheldon Keefe's first game back in the sixth since being fired by the Maple Leafs last year. And I just know this is going to be a great game, and there's going to be a lot of emotion probably from the New Jersey Devils side to make sure that they make it a special return, we'll say, and hopefully come away with the win, because he didn't get the win the first time. They spoiled his home opener, and they spoiled the second, the rematch. I'm imagining that Keefe would love, and the boys would love, to make sure that Keefe doesn't get skunked by the Leafs in his first year in New Jersey.
Yeah, this would be like, it's just one of those games where Keefe has probably had it circled on his calendar. I know people don't like to admit it, but I'm sorry, he's probably had this circled for a while on his calendar. And both teams have been, while there's always like that angst when the X comes to town, I think both teams have really benefited from the changes in a lot of ways, right? Like, I think Keefe
for sure
has really, everything. Like, the Devils have really needed a coach like Keefe for a long time, someone to bring some consistency to that organization. And Leafs needed a change in voice, and I think both of them kind of got what they were expecting.
Yeah, I think both coaches are definitely in a better spot and happier with the situations that they're in. Craig Berube here in Toronto, and then obviously Sheldon Keefe in New Jersey. I mean, the Devils are a good team. Like they're right up there, and in terms of the top of the metropolitan standings, they've got one of those three divisional spots as of right now, and I think they're going to be very competitive in the playoffs. They've got great depth up front. They've got a good blue line and one of the best goalies in the league right now. And Jacob Markstrom has been unbelievable, who they traded for over the offseason. So, Keefe has a lot of weapons and he's got a working power play, which is something that Craig Berube does not have. So that's going to be something that needs to be imperative for Toronto in this game. Don't take penalties. You got to be patient, and you can't take those penalties and put yourselves down a man and shorthanded so often, because the Devils, they can work the puck around and they know how to get the puck into those high danger areas. Like that's what Sheldon Keefe system's all about, right? We know that we've done it here in Toronto. The expected goals is always off the charts, but we'll see if they can end up scoring. That's kind of been a bit of a low spot for the Devils, though. Like you look at the team coming into this game, Dave, they've got just 2 wins in their last 8 games, and they haven't been able to score more than 3 goals in any of those games. They haven't scored more than 3 since December 27th, the first game back after the Christmas break. So, this is an offense that is skilled and talented and waiting to break out, but haven't quite seen it. So Toronto definitely has to be on their toes and be ready for them tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it where Toronto goes up against a team like Vancouver, who has been struggling to score, has been struggling to put up wins, and they get blanked. Like, I think a lot of ways the Leafs have really struggled and haven't capitalized on these opportunities. You got a team that's reeling a bit. You got a team that's not putting up the offense it wants to, and then it almost seems like you go to the games the Leafs and it cures it a little bit. That's what's been my feeling about the Leafs the last little bit. And like this is a good Devils team, right? They got some good parts to this lineup, especially their forwards, right? Like,
well, why don't we toss up the projected lines and we can kind of break it down, because you're right. This is a really, really talented bunch here, and they've got a lot of depth. Lines 1 through 4, pairs 1 through 3, and obviously, if it's going to be Markstrom, I mean, he's a world-class goaltender. Jake Allen, one of the best backups in the NHL as well. It's just a sound team from top to bottom. But you talk about it, like you look at the top 6, it's as good as anyone, right? Palat, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt. Then you got Timo Meier, Nico Hischier, and Thomas Tata. I mean, Dawson Mercer is on the third line, and like he's a good young player. But they've got so much talent up in the top 6 that he's now just tertiary offense for them, along with Paul Cotter, who's been a big addition for this team. There's a lot of depth up front that's going to give Toronto some fits.
It is, and like, let's not forget the last time the Leafs played the Devils.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure that was the game where the Leafs had registered only 1 shot on goal in the first period, and somehow pulled that game out of their rear ends. Like
the Stolars game. The Stolars game.
I think that was the game before he got hurt, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. Yeah, you're right.
And he had the Stolars game. Matthews scores that overtime winner, and like to me, like the Devils were just like, that was a game we gave. That was a gift, right? And so if you're the Leafs, you're like, teams are figuring it out now. Like, you're not going to get these gifts often where you come away winning despite being outchanced heavily. So if I'm the Leafs right now, looking at this lineup, like, even I know we're going to get to the Toronto line, but like, you got a McDermott in this lineup against the Devils. Like, they're going to be a physical team too. They're not going to be like, that's something you have to account for. And the Leafs, I don't think, are going to be throwing out their heavyweight going into the game.
No, because it sounds like Ryan Reeves is not going to be playing. But it sounds like he's going to be taking the night off, at least based on the lines that we saw in practice yesterday. Now, that was prior to the injury to John Tavares, so things could change with that injury, and things could move around, and maybe we do see, a Ryan Reeves end up in the lineup, or a Connor Dewar perhaps. But yeah, it's gonna be a dogfight, man. It definitely is. I will say this though, like I remember it being a talking point last time these two teams played about, was it Dougie Hamilton? I think Jack Hughes got lit up by Max Pacioretty, and then Hamilton didn't even respond. I remember that being a big talking point. It's like, same thing's happening in Sheldon Keefe's Devils locker room that happened in Toronto. So that might be something too, where if the Leafs start to rev it up and Pacioretty's going to be back in the lineup, I'd imagine he'll be hunting for some hits again. If he lays one, there has to be a response from the Devils this time around. Has to be. Like, there's no question that someone's got to respond out there. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, it's going to be a good game. It's two teams who are struggling a little bit. Like, we know the Leafs, they've lost 3 in a row. It's the first time they've lost 3 straight games in regulation all season. It's been over a calendar year since that's been the case. So I think both teams are going to be hungry to come out and start hot and try and get the win off one another. And I think it'll make for a really, really solid game. And the Leafs lineup is going to look a little bit different than it did the other night. So the Steven Lorentz, why don't we actually take a break? So we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll get to the Leafs lines. But the Steven Lorentz experiment, over in Toronto. Over, despite that line being the only line to score a goal. No more Lorentz on the top line. He dropped back down to the 4th line. We'll tell you what the rest of the lineup looks like next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a Maple Leafs game last year. I got the tickets about an hour and a half before puck drop, and I got a great price for them. The energy and excitement was unforgettable. And now Game Time has made it even easier to get your tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. You never have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you on a Maple Leafs game day. Toronto looking to get back into the win column. They are winless in their last 3 games. They picked up a grand total of 0 of 6 points, despite still sitting up at the top of the Atlantic Division standings. But they got to start picking up points if they want to stay there, and they're hoping to do that tonight against Sheldon Keefe's New Jersey Devils, who come to town, winners of just 2 of their last 8. So both squads pretty desperate to pick up the dubs tonight. We'll take a look at the Maple Leafs lines now because it is a little bit different than what we were looking at the first time around with or the other night against the why am I blanking? Who they played the other night? Dallas, against Dallas. Remember, Nye's taken off because Lorentz went up to the top line. That experiment is over. Matthew Knies goes back up to the top line with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. Pacioretty checking back into this game. He was a big factor last time that these two teams played against one another, so I'm not surprised by that. He'll be on the second line with Tavares and Nylander, keeping that third line rolling. Bobby McMann, Domi, and Nick Robertson. The misfit line remains a trio. And then the fourth line, a little bit of a switch up here. Pontus Holmberg gets back into the game for Connor Dewar. Camp remains your 4C, and then Steven Lorentz takes his spot on the fourth line right wing side. So that's what you're looking at for the forward group. But Tavares is now a big time question mark. So we could see Camp move up and possibly see Dewar get back in there. Maybe Holmberg moves into the middle and you get Reeves in there. So this was a projected lineup prior to the injury to Tavares, but I would imagine there will be some sort of change of this, assuming that the injury is going to keep Tavares out of the game. We don't know that for fact. We're just kind of projecting,
We're assuming.
based on how things looked in practice. But we'll find more out later on today, hopefully, when the coach speaks in the morning. The blue line has a small change as well, doesn't it, Dave?
Just a little, just a slight change. Nothing major. Not someone we've been praying and hoping to come back. That, by the way, that's Jake McCabe for those who don't know.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
We finally got to see Jake McCabe. Like, he practiced the other day, but then he didn't take line rush, so we knew, okay, he's not back. Then the Leafs sent Marshall Refi down to the Marlies, and that's I can't remember if it was before or after practice, because then Jake McCabe was taking line rushes with Chris Tanev, and all is now right in the world. And surprising enough, Ekman Lars OEL is been moved to, I mean, obviously you got the trickle down effect, but it's Conor Timmons that stays in over Simon Benoit. Are you surprised on that?
Not a whole lot. I think two reasons why. I think you look at Conor Timmons, and I think you like the fact that he is a natural righty as opposed to Simon Benoit. And maybe it's the fact that Sheldon Keefe buried Conor Timmons when he was here and never gave him an opportunity to play realistically. So maybe this is Berube saying, hey, go show the guy on the other side that you were worthy of those minutes that you didn't get. Maybe a revenge type narrative could play in here. And I think that it's probably also like you're at home. I would think that that third pair will end up just being buried in the offensive end. Like they're going to get extremely favorable matchups and definitely get sheltered a little bit. And hopefully with those two together, OEL and Timmons against like third and fourth lines, maybe they can help provide a little more offense, some speed up from the back end, some puck moving abilities from the back end, maybe help, some quick transition against the bottom six of the Devils. So that would be the other maybe reason for why you go with Timmons. A little bit more skill, obviously, with the puck than Simon Benoit. That would really be my only reason why, though.
Yeah, I just think that Benoit hasn't I know the broadcast was really pumping up in the stretch where the Leafs were playing very well, but to me, when you're looking at guys that have to be better net front, he's one of them, right? He's supposed to be that hard to play against defensemen, big moves, it's tough to play in front of the net against. It hasn't been the case. So
no,
I think it's good to give him a chance to sit and be like, you gotta watch a game from the press box.
Yeah. And I think that's probably going to be the message that they'll give to him. Like, hey, just take a night off. Go. It's almost like what Keefe used to do with Justin Holt every now and then, right? Give him the night off and then get back out there, and usually Holt did respond. Is Simon Benoit the new Justin Hall? Possibly, realistically, could be the case. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, I still believe that this team needs to improve on the blue line. I mean, Yanni Hakanpää was skating today also. He was with the team, not ready to get activated, I don't believe yet. Still a little bit away, but it's nice to see that he's now taken part in a couple of full practices with the group. And, he's somebody who probably will end up getting an opportunity to factor into that kind of third pair right side or second pair right side role. And then all of a sudden, Timmons and Benoit, if fully healthy, are your seventh defenseman at best. So that's kind of what I think the Leafs are hoping for as they, come out of the other side of the trade deadline. Neither of those two are nightly options for you, and you've upgraded the depth of that blue line. Anything else you want to get to before we take off for the day here, Dave?
No, I'm curious to see how let's just say there was a big conversation. Maybe I'll ask you this. There was a big conversation in the Discord today. I don't know if your notification was blowing up like mine did. I tried to be the peacekeeper in all of it, like not really steer the conversation one way or another. But there was a big debate about the response from the players about the booing from the fans and how Nylander kind of came out and says like, yeah, we hear the booing, but it's like we're not going to let it affect us, and like maybe in a way kind of rubs the fans the wrong way because like they're booing you because they're not happy, but on the other side they're like you kind of ignore it because you can't let it bother you while you're still trying to go out and do your job.
Yes.
I'll also read you the Nylander quote just so I'm not just paraphrasing. Doesn't really matter if they boo. We know we're a good team.
Yeah. See, that's where I think he gets caught, right?
Yeah.
He's basically calling Leaf fans stupid. Like he's sitting here saying, you know, hey, they can boo all they want, but we're a good team. They clearly don't know hockey. Like that's like what I surmise from that. Ultimately, it's a little condescending, to be honest with you. So I can see the issue. I can see the issue that a lot of fans have with it. If he would have said like, I mean, I can't. What was the first part of the line he said, word for word?
He said, doesn't really matter if they boo.
Yeah, so you could say that doesn't really matter if they boo, you know, and he could follow that up with, you know, they buy tickets and look, we weren't playing well. I mean, we've lost 3 in a row. I mean, I probably would boo too. It's up to us to play better and make them cheer. That's how you answer that question. But to say, I don't really care if they boo. I mean, we're a good team. So, like, what are they booing? I mean, you've lost 3 in a row and you look pretty terrible against Dallas. Like, what do you mean? What do they boo it? They're booing you because you stink. You haven't scored. You've got 1 goal in the last 10 games, Willie. Like, what are you talking about?
The best part here too is like good teams find their way out of this. It's only been 3 games, so what's really the big deal?
3 games. That's the big deal. It's 3 games, but it's also been. Dude, this guy's got 1 goal in 10 games. Like, it's not like he's lighting up the scoreboard. The big reason for why the team isn't winning is because he's stopped scoring.
Yeah, like this is where I think players need to really think about what they say before they say it.
And shooting, by the way, I just really quickly want to finish on the Nylander rant for how poor he's been. I think maybe we've been giving him a little too much of a pass for how poor he's actually looked over the course of the last 10 games. But you date back to basically coming out of the Christmas break. He has 1 goal since then, 1 goal since coming out of the Christmas break, and he has recorded more than 3 shots just once since the new year. 1 time. His last 6-7 games, 2 shots. He had 4 against Carolina, which was an awful game. Didn't record a single shot in Philadelphia. Had 1 shot in the first game against Philly. Had 3 shots in Boston. 2 shots against the Islanders. Like, he's not even putting pucks on net anymore either. So, like, Willie's he's got to pick it up, man. Like, he's making a lot of money now too. So, A, you're not producing, and then you're making comments like that. Yeah, no wonder people are pissed off. I'm getting fired up now. I'm getting fired up about
I opened it up, but I'll say I agree with you. Like, you know, I'm usually one to like, you know, side in certain ways, but like I think with Nylander here, like there's a reason why they're booing. It's not because you've lost 3 in a row. It's how you have lost the 3 in a row. The fans aren't booing you if it's a close game and they see you put an effort.
Right.
When you get shut out on home ice and look terrible, when you lose 4-1 and look terrible, they're going to boo because you look terrible. And
well, how about you know, you give up 6 goals and your best players are -6.
Right.
Carolina
at that point, but they also probably would have booed at that point too.
Well, that was the beginning of the losing streak. So it's like all of that compiling, you get booing. It's just it's the way it is. Like you've got such a short attention span in the world nowadays. 3 games, that's a lot. That's a whole week of losing. It's not 3 games, it's a whole week of your fan base suffering.
And again, it just reminds of people are just not happy sometimes that players aren't more bothered by it because they everything that this fan base has been through the last.
That's it. It's not, oh, we've lost 3 games. It's, oh, we've only won 1 playoff round in the last 20 years. That's what it is at the end of the day.
Yes.
All right. Before I get too heated, why don't we
usually I'm like the cool calm cucumber right now.
Yeah, no, I read that quote and I was just like, I don't. If he was playing well, then I think it would have been different.
Yeah.
But he's got 1 goal in his last 10 games. Like, you can't say you're playing well. You're not. You're not doing enough at the very least. And he's been very quiet in a lot of these games. Very, very quiet. But anyway, Leafs, Devils tonight. Sheldon Keefe makes his return. Toronto looking for the series season sweep of the Devils if they can win the game tonight. I believe the Devils are favored on FanDuel. I was looking at that. So, the Maple Leafs considered the underdogs at home, but they've done it twice before. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow to break down Leafs and Devils. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.